Happy Monday, everyone. This is Martha with Nature Niche, and this week I want to talk to you about vernal pools. They're a unique type of wetland that are very fun to explore this time of year. Some call them the coral reefs of the Northeast forest. They have such incredible diversity and provide really important ecological roles and services per unit area, so given how small they are. So vernal pools are naturally occurring, seasonally flooded, shallow depressions, and they're generally wet in spring, although some may fill in the fall. And then they tend to dry out in that late summer, early fall time period. They're associated with forested landscapes, and they have no fish populations, which mean fewer predators to other reptile and amphibian species. So I'm coming to you today from the Little Forks Conservancy's Riverview Nature Preserve here in Midland, Michigan. What a pretty place, what a neat vernal pool. The vernal pools have 5 general key characteristics to look for. They are seasonally flooded, and here in Michigan that's for at least 2 months a year. And the water in them comes from precipitation, it could be from groundwater flow, surface runoff from the surrounding landscape, overbank flooding associated with intermittent streams. Secondly, they are small and shallow, so they're under 2.5 acres in size, and most are under 1/4 acre in size, and generally they're less than 3 feet deep. I'm standing in kind of shin deep water here, ankle to shin deep. I probably could top my boots if I wanted to in this one, but it's pretty cold today, so we'll try not to do that. Thirdly, they're isolated geographically, so there's no continuous stormwater connection. They usually surrounded by upland habitats, but I want to stress that they are biologically connected by wildlife that use both this wetland area and the adjoining uplands to complete their life cycle. And they're hydrologically connected either through groundwater, temporary stormwater like surface water connectivity. Fourth, they lack fish. And lastly, vernal pools contain indicator species. So these species rely on the vernal pools for their survival. Some are obligate to vernal pools. Example would be fairy shrimp, which is a orange, really neat 1-inch long crustacean that you will only find in vernal pools. And their eggs have to dry out and really sometimes get really quite cold before they will hatch. You will also find blue spotted and spotted salamanders and wood frogs, and those species do best in vernal pool settings, but you can find them in other wetland types. But really in vernal pools without those fish predators, those species do really well. And you can also find really neat species like these little fingernail clams. These you can generally find in vernal pools throughout the entire hydrologic period, throughout the whole season. So those are neat little guys to look for. So where do you find vernal pools? They're throughout the state of Michigan and all different kinds of forest types. And the vegetation, it's not, one type. This one's a pretty open, classic vernal pool with little vegetation, especially in the deeper water areas in the middle. But they can be shrubby with a fringe of buttonbush, or up here in the Midland area, speckled or tag alder. They can be a forested area with red maple, so we have some of that on the edges here. And they can be marshy with a lot of forbs, and you can see portions of this vernal pool do have some neat sedges and other species that are able to grow in the more shallow water areas. So the hydrologic periods do vary. You can have short cycle and long cycle vernal pools, spring filling versus fall filling, and you can even have semi-permanent pools that might not dry out in a given year. It may be several years before they do dry down. And that annual water pattern is really key to how the ecosystem functions. It gets newly flooded, and you have these early spring periods, mid-spring with the highest biodiversity, late spring and summer where the water temperatures warm up, and then that drying down period before you cycle back to newly flooded. So species can be found, those species change across that drying and wetting cycle, but as I mentioned, these fingernail clams you can find pretty consistently whenever you visit a vernal pool. So why are vernal pools important? Three main reasons: they provide wildlife habitat, really important ecosystem services, and they have social and educational value. So in the Northeast US, over 550 species use vernal pools for, foraging and reproduction. Species like wood ducks and great blue herons, deer, black bears, bats for feeding. All sorts of reptiles and amphibians can use them for reproduction. There are rare species like spotted and Blanding's turtles, smallmouth salamander, red-shouldered hawk, and a few plant species like shoe-marred oak and false hopsedge that are rare and found in vernal pools. And these pools really provide important food, energy, and nutrients within the pool and to the surrounding forest ecosystem. And nutrient cycling is really important. You get better decomposition with that wetting and drying cycle than you do with stagnant water wetlands. They're important for water storage and groundwater recharge, flood control, and to help improve water quality, storage, and infiltration. And as far as social educational value goes, they're easy access to study, relatively speaking, pretty easy to get to. They're not too deep. You don't need a boat, and there are really lots of cool things to look for. Who doesn't like looking for salamanders and enjoying some tadpoles on a spring day? I wanted to mention that, vernal pools really fall through the cracks when it comes to our wetland regulations, and much of their protection is only voluntary. In Michigan, our current wetland regulations cover wetlands within 1,000 feet of our Great Lakes, connected to or within 500 feet of an inland lake, pond, river, or stream, and wetlands that are over 5 acres. Vernal pools are usually more isolated, smaller than that, but they are essential to the preservation of our state's natural resources. They do get lost and degraded through development, fragmentation of the habitat with trails and roads. They can be deepened and fish added to alter the ecosystem. They can be filled. Often they're polluted. I don't know what it is about vernal pools and old tires, but often people use them for dumping, unfortunately. Timber harvesting can change the shade conditions and temperature conditions. Nearby invasive species may have an impact, as well as climate change, changing the hydrology and temperature and how fast evaporation happens. So I wanted to mention that Michigan Natural Features Inventory has a Michigan Vernal Pool database that was launched back in 2012, and I've done some monitoring and data submittal for that. But I can see that there's not much data around Midland, so we need to get out and monitor our vernal pools. There is a Michigan Vernal Pools Partnership website. I'll include that link, and a Vernal Pool Patrol Hub site. And so what can you do to help with vernal pools? You can learn about them. You can share your knowledge with others. You can promote their conservation, and you can join the Vernal Pool Patrol. I'll put a link in. They have 3 recorded training sessions where you can learn how to monitor and submit helpful data and be part of this community science project and add to the database. I just want to mention, to be a good vernal pool steward, you do want to take a look at their disinfection protocol, and for all your gear and equipment, including your boots, you want to avoid the transmission of disease, organisms, and invasive species. So a weak bleach solution on all your gear, including your boots, kind of scrubbing off dirt and plant material when you're changing sites, and letting your equipment dry out is important. So where there's no water connectivity or not animals freely moving, if you're going large site to a vastly different site, you'll want to follow that disinfection protocol. But that said, I hope you find some time this spring to get out and explore some vernal pools in your area. Thanks, and have a good week.